Welcome to The Incredible Messenger, a blend of real-world stories, expert insights, and proven strategies that keep our families, communities, and cities safe and healthy. Moving beyond rhetoric and politics to practical solutions and community safety, here's your host, Jonathan McMillan.
All right, y'all. Thank you for joining me, Jonathan McMillan, the host of the Credible Messenger podcast. I'm really excited because this is literally episode number 2. Things are working out beyond my wildest dreams with how people have received even the concept of this podcast and the people who have agreed to join and be a part of this conversation. I'm struggling just for a moment here to even come up with the right words about how excited I am about the Credible Messenger podcast and the vision that I have for it. The whole point of this platform is to create a space where we move past the rhetoric, where we move past the partisan fence of you're on one side or you're on the other side of the issue of gun violence and firearm injuries and death, and more to a space where this podcast can be a platform for a conversation that is focused on solutions and that we can all get to know what our common goal and common interests are. And I think that the guest who's on with us this episode is a person who I love talking to about all things, especially because what brought us together is our shared passion for the work. His name is Preston Adams, and I don't have an official bio to read to everybody. So Preston, thank you for being on the show. Brother, tell me about yourself. Tell me, who is Preston and what got you started in the work? How did you get started in the work and why?
First off, it's a privilege to be with you. So, really grateful for the conversation. Even backing up a little bit, you were talking about kind of words escaping you. And I just think a lot of times in this work, words escape us, whether we're talking about grief and trauma or we're talking about really incredibly privileged, sacred moments, the words escape us. So, I just want to echo that, but it's a privilege to be with you. Who is Preston? And I'm actually glad you don't have a formal bio. Sometimes those feel weird when we're just reading off this resume. And so I'm actually glad we didn't do that.
That was by design. Again, I want this to be a space where it's not about introducing guests in having this formalized talk. This is a conversation. This is a necessary conversation. Hopefully the audience and the people who choose to download and subscribe, and yes, that is a call to action, everyone, download and subscribe, feel as if they're not even just observing, but participating in a conversation with people who are just as passionate about finding solutions. And, if you and I were talking and someone happened upon us in a public space, I would introduce you as how I introduced you. This is my guy. This is Preston. This is what Preston does. He has a organization. He's doing dope work. And that's what I've invited people to. And look, I'm using the word I way too much. Let me go back to you.
You're good.
Tell me
You're
about
good.
Preston. Tell me
Yeah.
about Fly, Fully Liberated Youth.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Preston is a co-founder of an organization. You named it, Fully Liberated Youth, Fly for short. Preston's a husband to an incredible partner, Francine. I'm not here without her love and her unending support, her love for the work too. She's not my co-founder. I'll speak a little bit about Natalie, but my partner Francine is a co-collaborator in this space and just a lover of humans and specifically our young people. So wouldn't be here without her. I'm a father of a son, a 6-year-old son, Uriah, who's the joy of my world. And we were sharing a few days ago just the overwhelming unconditional love that I've been blessed with as a father, and I know you have that same. So once again, like that's a huge part of my world. But I'm a co-founder of an organization really centering gang-involved, system-involved young people throughout the Denver metro. My co-founder, Natalie, she's phenomenal, incredible. She came into the work as a licensed clinician. She's a therapist. We met, I want to say going on 6, 7 years ago at a juvenile facility where we were both working with young people. So Natalie's phenomenal. She's Palestinian. So that's a huge part of her story and how she sees the world. And so I'm a co-founder. I am from Colorado, specifically Aurora. My wife's from Aurora. So Aurora, Colorado has a huge part of our heart. I love sports. We're both wearing our Denver Nuggets hats.
Yeah.
Everything Denver sports, I'm about it. Nuggets, Broncos, Avalanche. I'm still a Rockies fan. That's
Oh,
a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing. We could have
yeah.
multiple podcasts about Denver sports. I love hip hop music. I love to exercise. I love to get out, be with family and friends. I love all things tapping into like art and creativity. I've grown in my understanding. I used to believe in this binary thinking of you're either like an athlete or an artist.
Mhm.
Like you can't be all of them. And like if you aren't doing traditional art, then you're not creative. And I've thrown that all out the window. So I love just different creativities, and launching an organization is creativity in itself. And I think I didn't
Yeah.
realize that until we started getting into it of like, we're a nonprofit, but you got to run nonprofits similar to businesses if it's going to be sustainable and effective. So it's a business, but it's also like a deep part of creativity, and it's helped me tap into like more of that creative space. I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a godfather, and I am a human that, as I like to say, I'm on this journey of my own liberation, and we can talk more about what that's looked like, but just a human out here, like really blessed and privileged to be living the life I am, having the experience I've had, specifically with the young people that I've been privileged to be in relationship with. So I guess lastly, and I'm just a human out here just trying to be a part of this liberating movement that I believe is out there. Once again, I'm privileged to be a part of it. So that's a quick high level snapshot of who I am in the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
And I love the answer, taking on the perspective that you're a multifaceted individual, right? You're not just one thing. I think that one of the most profound things that I've learned on my journey is understanding when we're kids, we're typically asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. And the limitations of how that question is typically presented is, what's your career? What career do you want to pursue? Right. And we don't necessarily ask our children, how do you want to show up in the world? What is it that you want to contribute? What do you want to get out of the world
Mm,
and out of this experience during your
mhm,
time on this earth?
mm,
And that's what leads to a lot of the frustration. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you move past that box of, this is what I want to do, therefore this is what I want to
mm,
be, then you become liberated, right?
mm,
And
mm.
knowing you the way I do and knowing the work that you're doing, I'm making a pretty informed assumption, but that's the concept behind Fully Liberated Youth. Am I wrong in that?
No, no, and even before we came on, we were talking about this event, and we were privileged to, as an organization, be asked to speak at a conference. And really our hope in our session was elevating the lived experience of our young people. And too often, our young people feel silenced and demonized and judged and marginalized and looked at sideways and all the things. And one of the initial questions I asked was, what do you hope folks get out of this time?
Hmm.
And one of my guys was like, don't judge a book by its cover because there's a lot of pages in the middle of that book. And this is a young man with tattoos on his face, and he looks a certain type of way. And he says that because he knows folks look at him a certain type of way.
Hmm.
And it goes to what you just said of like what we hope for ourselves and all of our young people is like, you don't box us in. Don't box us in.
Hmm.
And don't judge a book by its cover. We're gonna blow the covers off your box. And like you said, that's liberation. And you can put that metaphor on humans, you can put that metaphor on your spirituality and how you see, if you see the divine or the universe or God, how you see systems, how you see people that disagree with you, like you said, of we everything's so partisan. So it's like you could blow the lids off of all of it. So really you're 100%. If you were to make it concise, is like, yeah, we're trying to blow these boxes up and
Okay.
really, really see folks liberated, especially ourselves as well. I think the work really starts with ourselves. So,
We'll dig into that a little bit more. What I want to talk about first is when we talk about community violence intervention and doing this type of work, it often gets conflated between primary prevention, secondary prevention, intervention, violence interruption. And based off of my years in doing the work, I've done all of those things. I've done primary prevention, secondary intervention, violence interruption. There's a lot of focus now on CVI, community violence intervention work. And there's people who want to get involved in the work,
mm,
but they don't know how. They don't know
mm,
exactly
mm,
what all is a part of it.
mm.
Walk me through a typical day or maybe even a typical week of what your work is. What is the work of doing community violence intervention, working with some of the highest risk youth? I mean, when I say highest risk, the highest risk of being involved or impacted by violence.
It's a great question. And yeah, and I know that you and we agree on this. It's hard because like we don't want to put pejorative deficit based language
Mhm.
on anybody. And the tension we live in is like folks need to understand the reality, right? So when I say highest risk, I'm not trying to use deficit language. What I'm trying to reframe for folks is like there's as folks say and our young people say, like there's levels to this.
Right.
And our young people, they are the most incredible, empathetic, compassionate, loving, caring, brilliant, creative leaders, I believe, in our community, in our city, in our state, in our nation, in our world. They are still, as you said, like at a high risk of being victims or victimizing. And that's for a myriad of factors,
Mhm.
systemic, mental health, trauma, all of the things, right? And we can get into that. But you asked a specific question. I think it's a great question. What's a typical day or week look like? Oh, gosh, it is, you got to be flexible. Um, and my days and weeks have changed, but I'll do it through maybe multiple lenses of like direct service week
Yes.
where
Yes.
like I'm in the trenches um for a lot of like doing direct service community violence intervention, however you want to frame it. And a lot I come to this word, I think the best framing of the word would just be a mentor. I don't personally don't I don't use like a case manager. I just use like a lot of times young people prefer even to be like that's my mentor. So that's the word
Yep.
that's kind of how I came to the work. I've been an educator, I've been a chaplain, I've been all these things, but like mentor would probably be the best that describes me. So in my weekly or daily work as a mentor, where that's all I'm doing, And I'm gonna share it from the perspective also of like being in juvenile facilities and in the community, because a lot of
Yes.
my work is in facility. So a lot of my work I come to was at Lookout Mountain Youth Services Center, the highest maximum secured facility for young men in the state of Colorado. Now, most of those young people that are at Lookout, or now as it's renamed Calm, it's mostly aggravated robbery, so robbery with a weapon. It is attempted murder or it's murder charges.
Right.
And young people can be there up until their 21st birthday. Most of those young folks are gang involved. And so a lot of my training and indoctrination is lived experience with those folks at that facility. And so my my day or week might be up there for a couple days a week where I am working with young folks that are literally at that facility. And once again, they could be there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, 8 years. There are 13-year-olds that are there till they're 21. A lot of that work is truly as cliche as it is. It's like meeting young people where they're at.
Okay. Okay. Let's unpack that a little bit. Where they're at. So when we say where they're at, I mean literally they're incarcerated, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I know that's not what you meant by that. So when you say where they are, talk to me.
Well, you could even unpack that too, because in this session that we had, all 4 of these young people, they were at Lookout, and one of them specifically was like, the trauma that comes when you are incarcerated as 14, 15, 16, like, folks won't ever understand it unless you've been through it of like, I'm removed from my family for
Right.
years, not for a week or a day, like months, years. And you have kids from all over the state. So let's say like you're from Pueblo and that's a 2-hour drive. Like,
Right.
and you're talking about a lot of families that are dealing with systemic oppression and poverty. And then you're asking them to like maybe take a day off of work and then gas money and then food money to like get there and back to see their child. Like, so a lot of times you have families that this young man was saying, like, my, and I knew this because I worked with him. He was like, my mom couldn't come up to see me regularly.
Right.
The trauma so even back to like meeting young people where they're at, it's physical and it's figurative. It's physical because it's like I I have the privilege of meeting them in that physical space, and that does something to a relationship and of like, dang, like you're meeting me here? You came to see me here?
Right.
Right? And then when you get past like, well, you're just doing this because it's your job. And it's like, well, true. But also like I'm here because I love all my young people and I'm here to just walk alongside you. And when they start to see that and you build that trust and rapport and you're not just another professional and you're meeting them where they're at and
Mhm.
you're seeing them and then they can call you and you're showing up for staffings and then you're advocating in their parole hearings, like you're physically being there, that is a part of it. So I guess to reframe it is the physical piece of meeting them where they're at. But then on the other figurative, what these young men kept saying over and over and over is like, and this isn't to toot my own horn, it's just like what I embodied, maybe without realizing it. And now I'm really conscious of it. And I think it's just a tool in the tool belt of like they said over and over and over, because even folks in the crowd, and I just name it. Like I'm a white cis straight man. I name it for what it is. That's my identity. I know I check every box of privilege, and it is a privilege that my young folks even allowed me into their life. They could have said, no, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to meet with you because of my identity. And they didn't. But then to take it a level further, folks are always like, well, what did Preston do that like
Right.
allowed you to, how did he meet you where you're at? Like, what did he do to help bridge this gap in relationship? And
Mhm.
every single one of them would say, he didn't judge me. And he has never judged me. So I think the foundational framework where we meet folks where they're at and meet young people, specifically our young people, deeply gang involved young people, deeply system involved young people, is like there has to be this no judgment. Like you can judge them, that's your choice. But in my experience, every single young person said that paid huge dividends in trust. And I just believe the foundation of trust when we're working with anyone, any relationship, but specifically our young people, man, that trust, that goes for the rest of your life. And so meeting young people where they're at means like I came in with no judgment.
Okay.
Meeting them where they're at, I came in just really being like, and I know you talk a lot about it. And we talked about it the other day of like this idea of stages of change, right? Pre-contemplation, contemplation, all these things,
Right.
right? And a lot of the young people I met and I still meet, like they're like, I don't, quote unquote, they'll say this, like, I don't want to change, like F that.
Mm-hmm.
They're in pre-contemplation. I'm not judging them for that. And I'm also not forcing anything on them. You know, there can be literal preachers of like pastors and religious leaders and like really preaching, but there's preachers everywhere that aren't religious. They're coming in to preach whatever agenda they have. And our young people, they sniff it out the moment that you come preaching your agenda, whatever that is, they're like, nah, man, I don't mess with that dude.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that people who often want to get into this work, I'm assuming good intention, right? Just with anyone who's entering this
For
work,
sure.
right?
Yep.
And then if they prove to be other than good intention, then that's on them.
Yep. Yep.
One of the reasons that I started this podcast is so that people can hear what's effective. I mean, bottom line, you have worked with young people who, again, are at highest risk of being impacted or involved with violence, right? Young people who have been locked away for a really long time and then sometimes transitioning out. And we get people who have similar experiences and have traveled that path, myself included, right? You know, being gang involved when I was younger, being incarcerated, getting out, and being very ambitious of I want to work with young people. And this is what worked for me. Right. Not recognizing that what worked for you may not be a universal solution. So with that said, somebody who may be listening to this podcast now and says, hey, I want to get involved and be a mentor, be an outreach worker, or be a violence interrupter. I don't know exactly where to start. You gave them step one is when you're building relationships, the foundation of that is on your part, not being non-judgmental. Is there anything else that you think advice or suggestions for somebody moving into this work skill that they should develop or a perspective that they should bring into that work?
100%. That's another great question. And I recognize that like we can also come back because I didn't fully answer like what's a day or week in the life. Because I think that's really important. What skills or perspective? I think it's a lot around like the perspective you have. I also think like doing identity work and asking the real question of like, why do you want to get in this work? Like you said, it's like you want to trust people's intentions. And yet, if I'm real with myself, and I share this with you, and I share this openly because it's a part of my liberation journey, I came in with a white savior mentality.
Okay.
And I came in with I'll be really specific, a religious white savior mentality of like, I'm going to spiritually save these young people that are incarcerated. And that was like so harmful. And now once again, I'm still like, I'm never fully liberated, but like I'm on this liberation journey and I'm really cognizant of like, how are you entering into the space? And I'll be really transparent. Any sniffing of that aroma of and it doesn't just have to be with white folks, but any sniffing of like religiously saving the population we center, I'm like, nah, come back when that's not around.
Right.
Come back
Okay.
when that's not there. So there also with that has to be this level of humility. Can you learn past the lens through which you're coming into the work? Because once again, I I learned not from, I mean, I have so many mentors and they helped in this process 100%. And my young people taught me. And I think there was this spirit, whether I recognize it in the moment or not. And once again, it's not to inflate myself, but I had this spirit of humility to be teachable. And my young people
Mhm.
taught me. And they were like, off jump, your religious evangelicalism is harmful to us. And I had to, as Natalie says, and as other folks say, like, I had to let that metabolize in me
Okay.
and sit and settle and say, damn, what does that mean? And then I had to deconstruct all of that. And then I had to come with a new lens and perspective so that I don't perpetuate trauma, systemic racism, systemic oppression, all of the things that our young people, their families, communities have historically been subjected to. I don't want to perpetuate that. And honestly, religious evangelicalism does that.
Mm. Mm.
So when you ask the question, like, what do folks need to do? And not everybody comes into the work with that perspective. That's
Right,
mine.
right.
But one is humility. Because the other thing is that what I've heard is that some folks with lived experience are still, they come with a bootstrap mentality.
Mhm.
I did it, so you can do it.
Yep.
And then our young people, once again, are like, but you didn't take, you're coming in judgmental of like, you're judging my story. You're judging my reality. You're saying that, oh, I can work through it because you did. Well, that's judgment right there.
Right, right.
Can you just sit with me and understand that every story and every lived experience is different? And can you have the humility to understand that, like, just because you made it and the way you made it might not work for me. So I think off jump, one of the first things that any person that wants to get into any direct service work,
Mhm.
whether it's working with our young people or with unhoused and homeless or any group of folks that find themselves on the margins, you have to come in with humility. You have to.
You know, our first interview for this podcast, the same answer came up, or at least the topic of humility and being willing to be coachable and willing to
Mhm,
be mentored.
mhm,
And I tend to, well, it's not even tend. I define humility as being able to have confidence and an understanding of I don't know everything,
mm,
right?
love it.
Like there's
Yes.
still more for me to learn. I could be dope as hell,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And show up confident and
Yep.
humble enough to know that I don't know everything. There are things out there that can make me better, right? And better at
100%.
a better husband, a better father, a better leader, a better speaker, a better podcast host, right? Like all of those things. And I'm open to receiving that. That to me is humility.
Mhm.
But yeah, so
I love it.
let's do circle back though. I again, one of the things that I want people, particularly for this episode, but in general for the show, is to hear you and hear what does the work look like on a day-to-day basis? And we can even break this down into the days that you're doing direct services and the days that you're being a co-founder and doing the
Mhm, mhm,
business. And the business and the work are two different things. Doing the
mhm,
business of
mhm,
running a community-based
mhm,
organization. So
mhm.
let's go back to
Yep.
a direct service day.
Yep.
What does that
Yep.
look like?
Yep. Well, and I'm gonna shift it and I can come back to like in a facility, but I'm gonna go like community.
Okay.
When we're working with our young folks in the community, once again, like these are young folks who typically there is, once again, I'm generalizing. This isn't everyone's story, but I'm generalizing. Is that a lot of times there's historical system involvement with family.
Mhm.
So there's already a distrust, right? Like, maybe there's incarceration with family members. Maybe there's DHS involvement already. Maybe the young person's already been incarcerated or has been at a juvenile detention center. And so I lay that framework because there's distrust once again.
Mhm.
So our young people aren't just, ready to meet with their mentor. They're not just like, chomping at the bit, right? Like they're like, a lot of times once again, there's reluctance around like, I gotta meet with another professional. You know
So
what I'm saying?
So you're saying you have to track people down?
You gotta track them
Who's
down. And here's the thing is like, we talk about like this relentless pursuit because we will hire folks. And once again, we have to give this framing of the work of like, you can't have this. That's the other thing in the work is you gotta like almost remove any expectation. I think that comes in with the
Mm,
non-judgment is that one of our heroes, a man named Father Greg Boyle, runs the most successful gang intervention program in the world out in LA. And he was asked at a conference, this man stood up and said, Father Greg, please help me. My mentee and I have all these expectations for him and all these goals and all these aspirations, and he's not meeting any of them, and we're getting frustrated. And Father Greg said simply like, well, how about you stop having so many expectations? Like just show up. So we have to set the framework and the grounding of like this expectation that you're going to call or text or whatever. And right away, lickety split, you're going to meet with this young person. Like it doesn't work like that. And even families, there's this level of building of trust with families because, and especially once again, for me, another white person coming into I mean, the percentage and the demographic of the young people we work with is over 95% kids of color.
right.
So as another white person coming into Black and brown spaces where there's all the historical oppression and racism, they're just like, I don't want another white dude or a white woman in my life. So it takes a huge level of, once again, pursuit that I have to do, building of trust that I have to do. So all that to be said, like a day or a week, it might be like I get a new young person to work with. I might not connect with that young person for 3 weeks. I'm
Yeah,
texting on the
yeah,
daily. I'm pulling up at the house. I'm pulling up at the school. Well, they aren't at school. Well, I'm texting. Well, maybe they just changed numbers, right? Our kids change numbers like hotcakes, right? So I'm hitting them up on Facebook Messenger. They leave me on red, right? And it's just like, it's the constant pursuit. Or it's you have something scheduled and you go to pick them up and they aren't there,
yeah, yeah,
right?
right.
But then the other side is like, when you do make that connection, and let's say I'm working with a young person and I meet them, and a lot of times, once again, meeting them exactly where they're at is like, I can't come in with these huge expectations of like talking about stages of change and talking about Maslow's hierarchy and talking about like CBT and, like just different things. It's like, yo, you want to go hoop? Let's go hoop, right?
Okay.
Let's go to the
Yep.
rec.
Yep.
Let's go throw the football. Like, what are you into? What are you listening to? Do you want to just sit in the car, ride around, listen to music?
All right. So then when I was doing direct services, the last time I was doing direct services, both J. Cole and Kendrick were,
Mm.
I won't say just entering the scene, but they were entering into like the public consciousness. And there's this narrative of who's better, J. Cole or Kendrick. So that would be one of my first questions when I finally got them in the car, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
finally get them in.
Yeah.
I've done the chasing them around and tracking them down, and
We got him in the
we
car.
got them in the car.
We're here.
My question would be, all right,
Yeah.
J. Cole or Kendrick? And my God, like the floodgates would open up, right? Because now oh, you're that dude. You're not this professional. Because I want to go back to, you have another barrier in that relationship building in like your identity, right? Your
100%.
visual
Mhm.
identity and all the biases that come with that.
Mhm.
I do too, right? Because
Yeah.
at the time I was doing outreach, the program I was working for was housed within Department of Safety, right? And probably the referral came from probation. And
Yep.
so here comes this dude who, they don't know if I'm a probation officer. They don't know if I work for law enforcement. They
Mhm.
just don't know. And
Mhm.
again, they finally have relented and let me connect with them,
For sure.
right?
Yep.
And the first thing I'm asking them is probably a conversation they're having with their homeboys.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, that's who this dude is, right? So
Mhm.
my question to you is, do you have an icebreaker? Do you have a go-to? Do you have a something that helps make that connection? But you
I have like 1,000 icebreakers. I'm just asking open-ended questions all
mm,
the time,
okay.
right? And once again, I'm coming with a non-judgmental posture because even there, like that question, J. Cole or Kendrick, I'll have kids because I asked that question too.
Hmm.
F both of them. I'm on Mozzie. I'm on Polo G. I'm on
Yeah.
Kevin Gates. I'm
Yeah.
on whatever. And then in my head, I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know who's so then I'm being honest, humility, like, all right, who's Polo G? Play me a song.
Yep.
And then the non-judgmentalism, because once again, we can come in as preachers, preaching whatever agenda we have. A lot of folks, the quickest way to, in my lived experience, to like, and this sounds weird, but to put a barrier between you and our young people is be like, you can't listen to that trash. That's a
Oh,
quick way to be like, then they know exactly where you land.
yeah.
So for me, like, yo, put on a Polo G song,
Yeah.
put on a Mozzie song, put on a G Herbo song. I don't care how drill it is, put it on. And then what I'm trying to take out of it is then I'm asking questions of like, talk
Yes.
to me. Why does that song resonate with your life? Or
Yeah.
how does it resonate with your life? Why did you play that song for me? You know what I'm saying? Man, and I'll pull it out. I really liked when they said this.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to demonize them talking about doing whatever dirt they're doing, because then the young person says like, well, that's my lived experience. That's what I'm going through. That's
Mhm.
what my best friend was just killed. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. And so they're like, this is my life. And then, so if I say, don't listen to that trash, then they're saying, oh, my life is trash.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So my icebreaker is always just like, just trying to get something and find a point of connection, an entry point. Yo, like, do you like sports? If they're like, no, I'm like, dope. Who you listening to? I think when it comes hard, because this actually recently happened to me, I got a new young person I'm working with.
Hmm.
And everything I threw at him, it was just like nothing. Like nothing. Like, well, do you like any sports? Not really. All right, cool. Like, who you listen to? I don't really listen to music like that. Okay, well, what are you doing there? And like,
You're
what are you
right.
watching? I don't really watch stuff. Okay, like, you said you stayed up till 3 in the morning. What were you doing? I was watching stuff. Well, what were you, like, I'm on YouTube. Well, what are you watching? And I
Right.
couldn't get a lot. So then sometimes it happens like that and a lot of times in those moments though, they're testing and they're lying. They got their thing, but they're like, I'm not giving you too much right now. So anyways, I got just a lot of open-ended questions, trying to find an entry point around likes that we have.
Right.
Right.
Well, I remember those particular young people I was working with, or like you said, they're testing you. They're not giving you any information to work with. And the little bit that they do, they want to see what you do with it. Right. And so when they say, I don't really listen to anything, I don't really watch anything, and then it may be a day later, maybe a week later, maybe a month later, they mention something they watched, listened to, whatever, and you're like, "Well, I thought you didn't do that." That
100%.
means something, because they're like,
100%.
"Oh, he was listening to me. He was actually paying
100%.
attention," right?
100%.
So I appreciate
100%.
that. So let's say, okay, you got a new client or a new young person you're working with, right?
Yep. Yep.
And you finally tracked them down. You're
Got
having
'em.
those conversations,
Yep.
non-judgmental listening,
Mm.
but let's call it for what it is. You do want to initiate some behavior change in them,
Mm.
right? Like your motive
Mm.
is at least for me, and I know
Mm.
we shared this again, was I'm not trying to get them out their gang, right? I'm not
Mm.
trying to get them to change their identity. I'm just trying to lessen the likelihood that they're going to be involved or impacted by violence, right? So what's your process
Mm.
now that you've got them and you've begun to lay the foundation for that relationship? What
Mhm.
types of things are you engaging them in
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
introduce the at least possibility of change and reduce that likelihood?
Mm. Mm. Another great question. I think the way I phrase it or frame it is, once again, like, so much of the work we want to do is empowerment.
Mhm.
And once again, our young people, their voices, they feel like their voices and experiences, like it's all silenced and demonized and judged. So to come in and say, yo, like, what are your dreams?
Yeah.
What's changed for you? And I think the one thing that I learned really quickly is like, I think there's this mentality or this narrative or perspective that like, oh, these kids just want to kill each other, or these kids just want to gangbang, or these kids are just bad kids, or they just whatever negative, terrible, demonizing language people put on them. And in my experience, every single young person I've worked with at their core, they want different. And it's my, I don't want to say job, but it's my hope is to help, not do it for, like, it's on, once again, empowerment is to help and aid in them discovering that and pulling that out of them. Because none of our young people want to look over their shoulder at like getting shot all the, they don't want to go down to McDonald's and be like, run into a rival gang member and
Right.
look over their shoulder.
Right.
They don't want to keep going to jail. They don't want to keep living in poverty. And they don't, and honest, like a lot of them, it's like, I do everything for my mom. Like, I don't want to keep seeing my mom's struggles. They want change. And I think where we sometimes mess that up is like we project what the change we want to see in them versus like they know they have healthy change in them. How do we elevate that and bring that out? So all that to be said, the work as we're building, the constant work is, I believe, whatever percentage you want to put on it, but the vast majority is building relationship.
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing is like when they are in moments of crisis, which come a lot, and I've built the relationship, who are they going to call?
Mm-hmm.
Who are they going to text in those moments of contemplation when they're thinking about stages of change of like, Preston, I don't know what to do. My homeboy was just shot and retaliation is running through my mind. What can you work through this with me? If I don't have that relationship, I don't get to speak into that portion of their life. So relationship is so big for me. And I'm asking a lot around like, what are your needs? That's the biggest thing we're working through because once again, our young people we got to change the narrative. Our young people are not out here just trying to kill each other. That is not true. And so really a lot of it comes down to they are in this predicament for so many reasons. A lot of it comes down to systems of oppression, mental health, trauma, poverty, right? So a lot of them have significant needs or gaps that aren't being filled. So they're like, well, it would really help if I could be in a school because I've been expelled. Right there, we're like, okay, I'm going to work of like, I'm hitting up schools, alternative schools, GED programs. Like we got to get this young person. Cause if they're at home bored, not doing anything, they're only on social media, stuff's going to pop off.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going through needs assessment, right? Schooling. What are you doing for schooling? You know, if a lot of our young people are out here hitting licks, selling drugs, all the things they're doing because they need to make money. They're like, I need a job and I don't just need some low paying wage job where I'm working part-time. Like get me a job that can move me into a career. All right, who do I know that we can get this young person hired? Or we're building resumes together. We're on Indeed together. We're going to a different job site, you know, all the things. It might be like, Preston, I'm couch surfing.
Right.
You know, technically I'm unhoused. I need stability in a place to stay. And then it's like housing vouchers and all of those things, right? It could be something as simple as like, man, I've worn the same pair of clothes
Yeah.
and my shoes are undersized. And then I'm like, do we have it in our bank account to go $200 to go get clothes and shoes?
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't eaten in a day. Dude, let's go to McDonald's or whatever. Let's
Yeah.
just get you some food. So we're going through Maslow's hierarchy, honestly.
You took the words out of my mouth. Right? You cannot expect, and there goes that word expect. I think it's appropriate
You're
in this
good.
sense.
You're good. Yeah.
But you can't expect any type of behavioral change if their basic needs for safety, comfort, and anything else are unmet, right? How, safety and comfort. That's what a person needs in order to even begin to process or contemplate any kind of other change because they're in survival mode, right?
Yes. Yes.
So with that,
Can we here real quick?
go ahead.
Because I think there's two things I want to say because survival mode is a huge thing that folks need to learn in the work because Nipsey Hussle said it in an interview. They said, Nipsey, what's the solution to the hood? To all the things that are going on that you experienced and those around you have experienced. And he said, number one, you got to get folks out of survival mode. And then he said something that was just like piercing. He said, when folks are in survival mode, they do not think morally. And so once again, when we put that to understanding and empathy of what our young folks are going through, if they're constantly in states of survival mode, and I also want to really quick link that with trauma. Trauma rewires our brain to where we are in a constant, or not we, our young people are in a constant state of freeze, fight, flight, block, all the things, right? They're in that constant state of survival, literally their nervous system,
Yes.
right? When that happens because of trauma and a lack of resources and need not being met in Maslow's hierarchy, we can't even get from the bottom rung. People don't think morally. And one of my young people in this conference, he literally said it was just brilliant. He goes, when I'm in a trauma state, my morals change.
Mm.
And he says, I become a person that isn't me.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh man.
And so like, boom, right there. So back to the behavior change, like once again, and even if we reframe it of like not what we're projecting we want young people their behavior to be, but even getting them to think spiritually, morally, emotionally, cognitively, they've got to get regulated.
Yeah.
They've got to experience some kind of safety and belonging and healing. They need their needs met, which once again, those are the bottom two rungs of Maslow's. So we can't move up in behavior change if those bottom two, safety, belonging, that's the second one, but then like needs are met. So we've got to work through that of like what needs need to be met. And then hopefully in this relationship, we're building, as one of my young people said in this training, he said, because we went to healing and they said, and I said, what has helped on your healing journey? He said, genuine human connection. Well, that's the second rung, belonging and safety. So hopefully as we meet needs and in this relationship, we're creating a sense of safety, non-judgmentalism, love, belonging, community. We're moving up to where we can get to that big overarching thing of behavior change.
Absolutely. I want to go. You had mentioned something earlier about this narrative about young people. They want to be engaged and they want to be engaged in this behavior that is destructive. Um, one of my mentors taught in this class that it's about purpose, place, and belonging. Like what draws a young person to be gang involved or a antisocial group, right? Purpose, place, and belonging, and they're finding it with whatever that looks like in that space, right? Um, and it aligns with, like you said, the Maslow's hierarchy. So where I wanted to go with this, and I think this still aligns with like a day in the life. Um, like you said, so you identify we're at the point where you're assessing what their needs are, right? And again, not from a judgmental space. Like there's a little observation of school, housing, financial,
Employment,
all
yeah, all of it. Yep, yep,
maybe it's therapy or whatever that looks
yep,
like.
yep.
So we have this big thing called the system that is supposed to provide for all of its residents those basic needs, so those social determinants of health. What does it look like navigating or helping them navigate the system to get those needs met from your perspective, right? Is it calling your people within your network? I mean, is it building a network? What does that getting those needs met go? And you know what? You can even go here. What it's supposed to look like in theory, and what does it look like practically?
I think I'm gonna go here, and then you bring me back if I'm not answering it. What I think it goes to, and this is a buzzy term. A lot of the terms that I use are buzzy, but we as an organization and you and I, we don't want to just use buzzy terms. Like, we hope to embody them,
Mm.
right? Trauma informed, empathy, equity, all inclusivity, all these things. One of the buzzy terms is collaboration.
Okay.
And I call it buzzy because a lot of folks want to use it, but then when push comes to shove, it's like collaboration becomes one-sided, or it becomes ego-driven, or becomes about me and my thing. And so I think when you ask the question, like, how practically do we get young people's needs met, we have to collaborate.
Okay.
Because, like, we as an organization, Fly, cannot do everything. We cannot employ every young person we work with. We cannot house every young person we work with. We cannot educate every young person we work with. We cannot provide therapy and mentorship and case management and tutoring and pro-social activities and feed and clothe every single young person we work with. We can't. And so what does it look like to get out and network and collaborate with other like-minded folks? The way I heard it said by another similar organization in a different city was like being values aligned. And I love that.
Mm.
Like, who's aligned with your values? That you're seeing young people. Because here's the other thing, I'll be really real, is like, sometimes we will connect young folks to another resource, but we and I are really careful. Like, is that resource going to do more harm?
Oh, okay.
Are they going to do more trauma? So then we have to be careful too about our collaborative partners, not out of a sense of ego or anything, but like out of a gatekeeping our young people to say, like, we don't want them to be further traumatized, right? So it's even like navigating who are, once again, the values aligned partners, where we know, like, if you go to this job site, you are going to be held with love and empathy and with pursuit and patience and all these things, right? So a lot of it has to be collaboration. Like, who's working in housing
Mm-hmm.
that we can collaborate with to get our young folks affordable housing or rental assistance, or even like, even if it's like homeless shelters, like, which ones do we agree with or align with, all of
Right.
that. Or if it's like employment, I think that's our biggest gap. I think if folks are like, where's the biggest need or biggest gap for me and for us, what we're seeing, it's like careers. Because once again, if you're in survival mode and you don't have the financial means, like, our kids are out in the streets getting it,
Yeah.
100%. But like, there's a lot of folks, like a lot of businesses that will come to us and say, we want to employ your kids. And then you do some like feeling each other out. And then you realize, like, once again, they're doing it out of their own ego, and they're not going to hold and work with our young people the way that they need. Right. So I think a huge piece of our young people getting their needs met is like, we have to collaborate better and we have to network better. And we can't like all do the same thing. We at Fly, we center relationships and everything. Like, if somebody were just to be like, hey, really quickly, like, what do you all do well? Like, what's your bread and butter? I would say relationship.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then we're looking out elsewhere. Yeah.
You hit on a lot of different things, and I probably want to touch on a couple of them. And it's going to be a soapbox moment. So,
Please
listeners,
go.
please forgive me. One of the biggest challenges I still have to this day, because people know me, they know me for my work, they know what, my passion is. And I get young people or their parents or, whoever it may be, say, hey, I need a job. And I will reach out to people who have said what you said, hey, I'm willing to employ your young people, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I reach out to them, crickets, right? I'm not getting that follow-up call. I'm not getting that follow-up of the warm handoff that needs to happen in this situation. And it's one of the most frustrating things for me. I know people in the construction industry, in the development industry, and we know there's 10 dozen different cranes across the city, right? There's work exists. And if we can get a pathway for a young person into a career in construction or any of the things that are adjacent to construction, that's going to be a good life for them. But I can't,
Bro,
man,
bro,
it's so difficult to get people to live up to their word,
bro,
right?
bro.
But another piece that you mentioned, actually, I'm not going to go there. Preston, I have a feeling you and I will be talking a lot on this if you will be willing
Mhm.
to be a recurring guest on here. Everything you've talked about you're doing, the day in the life, right? And the work. And we haven't even really touched on the operations piece of this, of being a founder and being I don't, are you and Natalie co-EDs
Yeah,
or
we're co-EDs. Yep.
okay. We
Yeah.
haven't talked about like the fundraising and the paperwork and all of the. And
True.
I think I'm going to do a whole episode on that, and I'll bring you back for that because
Great.
we probably don't have time for that on this one. I want to get to, with everything we talk about on the direct services side, for you personally,
Mm.
how do you maintain optimal or close to optimal health across the spectrum, physical, mental, emotional, all of those things? How do you set what are the boundaries that you set? Because that's where it was when you said they're couch
Mm.
surfing, right? It
Mm.
could be real easy to say, I'll see if my wife can let you
Mhm,
crash on the
mhm,
couch, and
mhm,
that's a
mhm,
boundary.
mhm,
It should be, at least. I don't
mhm.
use the word should often, but so I'll pause. Go ahead.
Well, I want to back up because the folks that are just listening and not watching, when you're talking about like the warm handoff and not hearing back and crickets and like our kid, I'm just shaking my head. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's just like you and I, we both have seen it, experienced it. It's so frustrating. Um, how many times folks are like, I'll employ and do all these things for your young people. And then you're like, and then it makes you also look back because I'm going to my young
Right.
people like, I got a great connect. This is going to be perfect. They're doing an electrical apprenticeship and then they apply and it's cricket.
Yep.
And I'm like pumping it up. Like, you're going to be hired in 3 days. You're good.
Yep.
And then it's like, now I'm looking bad.
It damages the relationship.
Damn it. And honestly, in this training the other day, one of my young people, he framed it this way. A lot of people will hold out their hand, but then they pull it right back real quick.
Mm,
I was like, oh my gosh, that is so good. And he got to this place. So if he was like, that's why I'm okay just being independent. I'm riding solo because too many people have said, I'm gonna help you. They just pull their hand back.
yep.
And that's what our young people go through constantly. But you asked a new question. And the moment you said maintain, I'm like, here we go. Um, and I'm gonna kind of bring it back to like a day in the life. This work is so mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally taxing.
Mm,
And so even when you're like, what do folks need to understand or come into the work, you can't be naive.
mm,
And I think like there's just like people, because we ask that question in interviews, like, how do you take care of yourself? And people give the right answer, and we're like, no, no, but like, I don't think you understand. This work is just it's there's levels to this. And they're like,
yeah.
no, I got you. And then it's like 3 months later, like life has blown up for them. So, anyways, I think that's a big piece. I shared with you the other day, like I have lost 13 kids to the streets, as I would say,
Hmm.
majority through gang and gun violence. Had 3 kids killed by police. I've had multiple young people overdose. That secondary trauma, that lived experience.
Mm,
And these aren't 13 young people that just like one thing randomly on my caseload that I worked with for 3 months that's done. Like these
mm,
are every single one of those young people I knew I loved dearly and worked with for years.
mm.
These are little brothers. When you lose a little brother like that, and then you have 13 of them that you lose, like, man, it's messed with my own mental health. So
Yeah.
it's been a learning journey. And I've had to I've had my own like significant quote unquote bumps and bruises. And um, so, I'm going to tell you the kind of the standard, and then I'm going to kind of give it the real is like I said, I love to exercise.
Mhm.
And so anymore, like exercise is like out of just like, I do it for mental health. Like I gotta exercise for my own mental health. Um, I do my best to meditate. Um, some weeks, days, I'm better than others, but like just really like concentrated breathing techniques. I'm in therapy. I'm in therapy every other week. That started out as like once every 2 months, and then it jumped to once a month, and now it's like every 2 weeks. Then it probably in a couple of years it'll be every week.
All right.
So I'm in therapy. For the longest, I had a spiritual director, which currently my therapist kind of does this dual dance of like spiritual director and therapist, which I really appreciate. So once again, as we talk about like we're holistic beings, that's the word we use. I recognize that I'm a spiritual being as well. So like spirituality is a big part of my life. Um Relationships and community. There was a moment, this is kind of the real and the raw. There was a moment my wife and I celebrated 10 years a year ago. We're coming up on 11 years of marriage, and we
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. And we were with some of our favorite humans in the world. We rented out a beach house. Um, I know that's such a privilege to do. And we got to the beach with some of our favorite humans. And one night I was with two of my best friends, and I shared my mental health struggles, and they were like, "Why didn't we know about this?"
Mm.
And I don't want to label this. People can have their own reactions, but I just share with them like, honestly, like you all can't handle it. Like what I've been through with these young people, like I don't know what to tell you.
Mm. Mhm.
And can you hold it? And they gave me great feedback. They're like, we can't, but like at least you need to give it to us. So I say that because we have to have our community outside of the work. If you are solo dolo in your life and all you do, because you even said, and we can come back to that conversation of boundaries, all you're doing is picking up every call, and you're at every time there's a shooting, and you're, just running yourself ragged, and you don't have community outside of it, like burnout is right around the corner. And so relationships with people that love me and I love them. Once again, I have an incredible partner, times with my son, times with my wife. Mentors, I have multiple mentors in my life. So grateful for them. Um, and then sometimes, honestly, it's like binging on watching something. And
Yeah.
some people can have their own feelings, but like sometimes I need to just binge. Like I need to get as much junk food, clothes, like Uriah, can you go with the grandparents? We're gonna close the blinds.
Yeah.
We're gonna get DoorDash. And I'm just like, get me out of everything.
Yeah. Um,
Um, so
yeah. So for folks who don't know me, and this probably be news to you too. Well, no, we've had this conversation. Like, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm a Marvel fan. I'm a hip hop fan, right? Those are some of the things that bring me joy in this
Mhm,
space, right?
mhm,
Um, especially the Marvel and Star Wars stuff because
mhm,
it's
yep,
so not of this reality, right? It is a place where my mind can go completely free because there's never going to be a Hulk or Captain America or Black like
mhm, mhm,
Thanos is the threat of the world. Is not checking Twitter Saturday morning to see how many people got shot last night. Right? So I completely feel you on this.
mm,
I want to ask you a question, and then we're going to move into a segment that I'm trying out, and I think this is going to be dope. But before we go there, I want to ask you actually two questions. And what's a story that embodies the success that you hope to achieve, that you work to achieve? So is it I imagine even you kind of spoke on it, just what you experienced on, what was it,
Mhm,
Thursday,
mhm.
right? In the panel?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because, like, so we do this thing now, and it's become, like, a really beautiful I think the other thing too I'll speak on, we do a lot of grief work in our organization. So we
Mhm,
hold a lot of circles, we do grief and loss, we do a lot of, like, you know, we try to embody restorative. So we do a lot of, like, restorative circles, peacemaking circles. So that's a huge part of my own healing and my own health. Um, and, um And so, what the ritual, because circles bring out rituals too. And
mhm,
the ritual that we've started to do is like any event or space we're in, we have like this memorial. We set up like this memorial. Like we'll do candles and we'll have a sign that says like these are the memories of the young people we've lost. And we have pictures of every young person that that we love deeply, that was connected, that we've lost. And sitting with those four young people that were there,
mhm.
they were all connected to a picture or a person that we had lost in some way. And, we celebrate the small wins, like, and people can feel how they feel about this, but like our young people, because of the highest risk, the risk that they are, them being alive past 20,
Yeah,
21, 25, that is, man, that is a miracle in itself.
yeah. I
So
go
I just like, so success, we celebrate small wins. And that's throughout the journey, right? Like I had a kid get off probation 2 days ago.
Yeah, yeah,
That's success.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? You getting done with your DYS sentence and you're
yeah,
back home with your family. That is success. You got your first job or your third job or your fifth job. That I got a text this morning from another young man who, gosh, he's pushing 30. And he goes, I got that new job because he's been hitting me up. I need a new job.
yeah.
He's That's success, right? Once again, I think coming back to the way we framed it of like behavior change, and we want to see healing because we believe healing creates behavior change.
Mhm.
Um, and once again, we want to see needs met. So success is like, well, what is success to you, to a young person?
Yeah, yeah.
And so for me, a story that I define as success, like, man, I have a million of them because success is also me walking alongside young people and then being like, what's success to you? And they're like, in this moment, success for me is staying alive.
Yeah.
And a week later, they're alive, man. Look at you. You're alive, bro. A month later, a year later, you're alive. You transition from the adult system back to the community, you're alive. And you're off papers. Um, you know, the birth of a child.
Yeah.
Every single person sitting up on the panel was a father.
Yeah.
And seeing them talk about their children, because we were talking about healing and they all were like, my kids bring healing. That's success. So, um, and then, we have former young people that are now working with us,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that full circle. And then for me, I think the thing that embodies quote unquote success is just relationship. Like the privilege, the oldest young person that was there, he's 28. I actually taught in Park Hill at the school he went to.
Mhm.
We're almost going on 15 years of
Mhm.
relationship
Mhm.
for that. You know what I'm saying?
I couldn't agree more. It brings me a unmeasurable amount of joy when
Mm,
I'm out in the public somewhere and I run into one of my former
mm,
little brothers. I mean, not former, but my little brothers, right?
100%.
And he's doing his thing, right? He pushing a baby stroller, or
Mm,
he's the wait staff at the
mm,
restaurant I just happened to drop in for lunch, right? And it's like, hey, Jonathan. So yeah, that text message, that random
mm,
text message,
mm.
right? Like that is so dope. And I want to say I turned 50 this year. And
You better celebrate.
oh bruh, I'm celebrating all year. I'm celebrating all year because for all intents and purposes, at least through my eyes, which are the only eyes that matter,
Mm,
I have doubled my life expectancy,
mm.
right?
Amen.
25 years ago,
Mm,
25 years ago, I was walking into a prison,
mm.
right? And here I am 25 years later, I'm still standing, right? Not only standing, but I'm,
I was gonna say not only standing,
yeah,
but
yeah, I'm
yes.
thriving. I mean,
Oh, the thriving.
that's a whole
Yes.
nother thing. And like, it's also coincides with the 50th year of hip hop. So like, man,
Mm,
I don't know if you can see the backdrop, but
I
like,
see
I've
it.
been
I see
collecting
it. Littered
memorabilia
with it. I
all year
love it.
long, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's success, right? Is moving past survival, like conquering survival, and then moving to it,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Okay. So building on this, how you define success and what it looks like. Where do you see Fly
mm,
and the impact that
mm.
Fly will have in 5 to 10 years?
You know, your humility around like growth and you can always be a better whatever. But as a podcast host early on, like these questions are just they're fire. They're spot on. So
Right on, brother.
the vision for Fly, I think the present vision is like we're trying to embody our values
Okay.
in everything we do. So our values, four of them: humility, graciousness, sacredness, and liberation. So I think
Say
in order to
say
talk
those again.
humility,
Humility,
graciousness,
graciousness,
sacredness,
sacredness. Okay.
and liberation.
Okay. And liberation.
Mm. So I think like as we talk about our vision, we have to first start like where we're at. And we so much like who we are and who we want to embody is like how we do the work.
Hmm.
And once again, that's values driven. So for me, like I'm gonna give you a couple answers, but even in 5 to 10 years, what I want folks to say about the organization is like they do it different
Hmm.
and they embody they don't just talk about these values, they embody them. And they love these young people and their families and communities really, really well. Because truly at the core of it, I just believe love is going to be the liberating factor for all of us. So I just need to start with that of like we also hold the tension of like being professional because we do operate, we aren't the system. We operate within and alongside systems. So there's
Hmm.
this level of professionalism, like you said, like we get referrals from pretrial and diversion and probation and DYS and these different systems. So there's this level of professionalism that you have to operate within.
Hmm.
And also, we hold the tension for us. We don't want to become too big or too name it
Hmm.
to where we lose our values and we also don't embody this grassrootsy feel,
Right.
this culture, this like in the thick of it. Because once again, that can, if you become too on the other side, you create barriers of like client
Yeah.
and provider. We are providers, we have clients, but we also never want there to be a barrier. As Father Greg puts it, it's called kinship of moving past provider and client to where we are on the same playing field.
Right.
There's
Right.
non-hierarchy. Once again, going to humility. How do I, as a educated provider, having done the work for whatever amount of years, how do I continue to learn from our young people and how are
Mhm.
they training and teaching and coaching? We want to always embody that. But my hope for Fly as an organization for the next 5 to 10 years is that we get to experience the joy of young people and families l- liberating themselves, and we get to be along for that ride.
Okay.
That young people who have been written off, demonized, and gone through historical, systemic, structural racism and oppression, like they get liberated from all of that.
Yeah.
And because of that, we're talking about generational,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you're a living, breathing embodiment of generational change. That's what we want to see is that they are empowered and resourced and move up Maslow's hierarchy to where they're liberating themselves, which then in turn liberates their families, and then hopefully becomes a communal ripple effect where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the community they come from is also liberated. So it's at the core of it is being alongside that journey. And really, I don't even want to put like, oh, we want to see, we want to work with 1,000 young people this year, like I don't want to do that. Like, because to us, like, it's the importance of that cliche thing of like, who's in front of you.
Right. Right. Well, that's what matters. That's
That's what
absolutely
matters.
matters.
And then on the other side is like, we want to be a
Mm.
part of systemic change
Mm.
where once again, we're embodying equity of like, we see systems move to embodying restorative. So education systems aren't continuously feeding the school to prison pipeline.
Right.
So how can we be a part of the systemic change and that liberating movement of like, no, our young people are once again asset-based, strengths-based, like they're incredible. And we got to keep them in this school environment um, to really develop and empower that. And if you keep pushing kids out, they're headed for the streets and they're headed for prison. So how do we be a part of systemic change within schools and politics and the criminal justice system? The last thing I'll say, the eye-opening thing that every single young person on this panel said the other day, it was just like shocking, is they talked about how traumatizing the juvenile system was for them.
Yeah.
The trauma, every single one of them, once again, they're all close to 25 and up. We're like, that was the most, even more than the streets, like that was the most traumatizing thing for me.
Mm.
They also layered that with like, there are still incredible people in these
Mm.
systems. In probation, in diversion, in pretrial, in juvenile facilities, in the police system, in schools, like there are incredible people. And yet that's why we call it systemic,
Mm-hmm.
because these
Mm-hmm.
systems, and that was one of the questions of like, how are systems continuing to perpetuate trauma? So we want to be, as an organization, a part of slowly seeing systems truly embody restorative, equitable, inclusive, non-demonizing ways. And I know that that's a long ways away, but incrementally in these
Yeah.
next 5 to 10 years, that's what we want to see.
Well, you're speaking to my philosophy about solutions, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But understanding that the environment that exists, that violence is a product of, wasn't created in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 generations. This just goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? If not
You
thousands,
better be a preacher on that one,
right?
Jonathan. 100%.
So you have to be ready for the long fight, right? I think Nipsey named it best when he said it's a marathon,
No,
right? And
no.
again, I'm soapboxing a little bit. I think part of what you and I have to do, and hopefully that comes across in this conversation and the conversations of this podcast, is get the systems of the folks within the systems are making decisions to understand that the investment has to be across generations, and that whoever is in power may never live to see the change that they're committing to investing in now. But
Mm,
that's again, that's probably a whole nother
mm,
episode. I want to
mm,
transition, Preston, into
mm.
a segment that I'm hoping will be one of the dopest parts of this podcast. I call it "What's the Word?" Okay,
Mm,
and it's essentially word association,
mm,
where I'll get a chance to dive even maybe a little bit deeper into uh, who you are,
mhm.
and I'll start a phrase related to our conversation, who I know you to be, the work you do, and you finish it with the first word or phrase that comes to mind.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Uh Success is
Success is whatever a young person believes it to be.
community is
Community is belonging.
The one thing I want people to know about our young people is
They are sacred.
my favorite food is
Oh, threw me off. A really well cooked steak.
mm, okay, yes. My favorite book is
This will get into it. I have a deeply theological mind, and that's the space I come from. And so there's a book called The Liberating Path of the Hebrew Prophets. And man, that is a mind blowing book.
my favorite television show is
In this moment right now, mm, I'm going to say The Office.
oh man, I love The Office. I love The Office.
That's my binge. Like, I just need to, like, everything's so heavy and I can't deal with it. I'm throwing on The Office.
Okay, so favorite episode of The Office.
The CPR episode.
Okay. Mine is Prison Mike.
Wait.
That's the episode that I got introduced to The
Oh
Office.
my gosh.
Uh,
That's an
oh,
amazing episode.
second only to Diversity Day, which is
Oh,
like
diversity.
I see the internet like, oh, that episode is so offensive. Like it's supposed to be. It's
It's
supposed
supposed
to
to be.
be ridiculously offensive so that you
What not
see,
to do?
yes, like you don't get it. So, favorite movie.
American History X.
Ooh, mm, I have to revisit that. I couldn't get through it the first time.
Understandable. It is very hard movie to get through. It's just been shaped my life in different ways and different seasons.
I was very young when I attempted to watch it, and it had all kinds of. I mean,
Mhm.
I was in the mix of it, so I had all kinds of other
Yep.
trauma that that was. So I'm gonna have to revisit it. I know it's on a lot of people's best of list. Guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure is
My guilty pleasure is doing the goofiest dances for my wife and son as my wife wants to film them and blast them on social media.
awesome. If I wasn't doing community violence intervention outreach, however we want to frame this work, if I wasn't doing that, I would be
A attorney for young people going through the juvenile system.
that's dope. Okay. I am
I am love.
my theme song is
My theme song currently is a new one. I got introduced to a new rapper named Millies, Milllyz. He's out of Boston. And he's got a song with Styles P called Sacred.
mm,
And it's all about the loss of friends to the streets and the sacredness that they embodied. And that just hits me at my core. So right now, that's just like, I have like, this sounds morbid, but this is you'll understand this, the work we do. I have like a grief playlist, and that's just like sometimes on repeat.
okay. Um, this one, this is a tough one. The solution to gun violence is
Holistic.
ooh, I love it.
There's no one quick, everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants a solution. It takes everything and everyone to see these larger systemic issues be reduced. It takes everyone and it takes everything.
Awesome answer. Thank you for playing What's the Word?
I love it.
All right. So, man, this is again, the way this podcast is going is just beyond my wildest dreams. To coin a phrase from early in the conversation, it's exceeded my expectations. This is dope. I'm going to pat myself on the back for reaching out
You
to you to
should.
be on here,
Sure, yeah.
because this conversation is exactly what I wanted to have, and I hope our listeners value it. I'm sure people who listen to this are going to find value in this. I want to wrap this up, and so the show is called Credible Messenger, and I chose the name intentionally because of people like you. The work we do, right, is only received if you're a credible messenger. And it's not just with the young people who we're working with, or the young adults who we're working with,
Mm,
or the returning citizens who we're working with.
mm,
In order to build those relationships, you have to be a credible messenger. But also, again,
mm,
I want the people who are thinking about starting organizations similar to Fly, or people who are in positions, they're making decisions about funding. Uh, they can listen to whoever all day, but unless that message is credible, unless that
mm.
message is coming from someone credible, they'll never act on that information. So, with that said, I intentionally invited you on here to the show, Credible Messenger. I see you as being one of those. What is the one message that you want people to get out of this conversation?
I think the one message I want folks to hear is how incredible the young people that you and I have and continue to work with are. They radically changed my life. Um, so, like I said, my journey is one where I came in with a saviorism mentality. And what ended up happening in my liberation journey is like they saved me. And with that new lens of like how phenomenal in every adjective you could put on our young people, like they are, every positive one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if folks understand that as a playing field of like how, once again, and the language for it professionally is strengths-based, asset-based. If folks can understand that, then everything changes. Everything. How we do the work changes, right? Now we're not judging them, right? So as direct service, we're not judging their decisions. We're not judging them. We are building healthier, closer, deeper relationships. From a systemic level, if we really come with this framework of like, they are incredible and they can do things, and it is systems that have oppressed, then we listen to them. And then that changes the policies and the legislations we create and how we even discipline, and even on a micro level, how we teach and how, so
Mm-hmm.
and then it's media portrayal. Like our young people, once again, you could go on to anything of like, if you look up shooting in any news article, it's just like it blasted face on there. And it's, it's nothing positive,
Right.
nothing. So if we change the way we see young people, I think everything changes. There's an organization that I'm really connected with. It's a faith-based organization, but their whole thing is like, see, do, be. Like the first thing that has to change is how you see. How do you see the work? How do you see people? How do you see humans? And then in our context, how do you see our young people? So I think the thing that I would hope is that people begin to see our young people through a lens of sacredness and of beauty and love and true empathy and understanding and how incredible they are. That would be my thing.
Again, you have just blessed us with a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of insight. Um, I think this is going to be powerful for anyone who's listening and thinking about well, first off, those who can relate because they're in the work. I think that's really powerful to be able to feel validated when you're in this space and know that there are other people out here who are in it for the same reasons and
Right.
experiencing some of the same challenges. Thank you for bringing that validation. Thank you for bringing a healthy dose of optimism and hope for those,
Mm,
so that people can know that they're on the right path, they're doing the right thing. And for those who, again, who are thinking about getting into the journey, I think
mm,
that this can be a very hopeful message, because it feels like you have to do a whole lot to get into it. But from
mm,
if there was anything that I pulled from this, and I pulled a lot,
mm,
is that, I mean, it's about wanting to show up for the right reasons, and
mm,
then building relationships. That's relatively
mm,
easy. We'll do another episode about the difficult part of the business of,
mm.
I'm
Yeah.
already going to be scheduling that with you. Lastly, man, what I heard out of this episode is, for those who are in positions to fund programs like this, um, they can hear the reality of what the work really looks like, right? And
Mm,
where the investment should go.
mm,
So with that, I want to give you the opportunity to share out how people can contact Preston, how people can contact Fully Liberated Youth,
mm,
and if you have anything coming up that you want people to support.
mm. Well, one, I just want to say like mutual gratitude, privilege to be in this space with you. You are becoming such a good friend, and I hold you with such high regard. So to be allowed to be in this space with you, it's like it's such so much gratitude. As far as Fly, I mean the whole thing. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Follow us, Fully Liberated Youth. Um, that would be a great way just to connect with kind of the story and what we got going on and how we see the world and the work. As far as contacting, if you have general questions for us as an organization, info@fullyliberatedyouth.org. If you want to get connected with me in any capacity, it's my first name, Preston at fullyliberatedyouth.org. So, yep.
Awesome, man. I good with that information out there so people can learn more about it and follow and support. Preston, this has been wonderful, man. I surely appreciate your time. This is,
Same, bro.
man,
Same.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.